Hey everybody, welcome to this week's edition of Review Crew. It's the 1st of September, which means it's the start of spooky season here in Los Angeles, so that's going to be exciting. Today on the show, we have our Associate Editor Culture, Anthony Robinson.
Hello, greetings.
We have our Chicago Curator, Patrick McClean.
Hey everyone.
And we have our East Coast Curator at Large, Blake Weil.
Hi everyone, how you doing?
All right. We're going to get it kicked off today with our first timer, Anthony. So I think you're going to be talking about the Vandermist dossier. You want to take it away?
Yeah, hi. Long time no talk. So I got a chance to preview a one of those at-home boxes. Really, actually, kind of cool. And as you guys know, I'm fond of the at-home, play-at-home games. The one I got to do is this thing called the Vandermist dossier, which is it's kind of like it's a little mystery. I mean, the whole idea of it is that it's like a 40-year-old mystery, where you get a request from a Dr. Helen Vandermist, who has been estranged from her sister for some 40 years. Her sister mysteriously disappeared in 1979 in a small Dutch village, and she basically has a few remnants and some things, and she sends to you uh, to kind of help find the mystery and help her figure it out, because she's tried and she's got some new hope. So that's kind of the idea behind it, and it's kind of like it's cool. It's like it's the escape room in the box, but it's also got a lot of mysteries, and it turns into a spy thriller. I mean, it's a nice piece of ephemeral play.
And I know you mentioned in your review on the review rundown that it's based off of a Dutch game. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of like how it made its way to the U.S. and then kind of like how it plays from there, and whether the Dutch version kind of
Well, the basically what's going on with it is that it's a recreation of the original Dutch versions done by the same company, uh, which they are in the middle of rebranding themselves as Diorama Games. They originally were called. Um, Sorry, my brain is still trying to function here. Um, the original folks were Puzzle Post, but they're rebranding themselves Diorama, and part of their rebranding, they're launching a Kickstarter in the fall. They've completely reworked the game. Um, uh, they've updated pictures, they've updated puzzles, they've I guess the other game is a really beautiful in-depth game, but they kind of wanted to step it up to the next level. So and they wanted to bring it to a wider international audience. So they got it translated to English from the Dutch. It is, like I say, new puzzles. They've reworked puzzles, and it's kind of cool because if you look at their original site, you can see actually side by side, like there's little, like the props are changed, they've been updated and reworked. Um, and it kind of plays out kind of like an escape room, kind of like if you ever did like the old like video games, like Myst, like the old searching, point and click games where you had to search through things. um Kind of like what's the video game we were talking about at home, um you know in a box. And it's really kind of cool. I mean, like there are solid puzzles. I mean, like a lot of these games have, there's solid puzzles. There's ciphers, but there's also physical puzzles. And it plays out pretty much in that same way. There's like a lot of neat aha moments, like you can get like in escape rooms, where you kind of like, if if you put a certain thing in a certain place at a certain time of day, a certain thing happens. And I don't want to spoil it on this, because there are some really genuine neat moments where you kind of go through it and you go like, oh, that's really cool. um, so that's one of the things that I found with it was kind of awesome.
Yeah, and Anthony, I'm curious to learn with this particular boxed experience when it comes to the puzzles. I've done several of these of myself as well, where you get a package and you open it up, and there's all sorts of cool little things to explore. But it's always very interesting when the puzzles are there just for puzzle's sake, and when the puzzles are there as part of like a narrative, as part of a realistic thing. Someone recently updated their will and testament and put it in a locked bag, and you need to find the combination versus this. You look up at the stars and you notice that the stars have weird letters on the inside of this box. Could they be corresponding to the possible shoe size of the people who came before? Like, is it, you know what I mean? Like, is it like just
Yeah.
there to kill time, or is it there
No,
as part of something?
and that's actually one of the beautiful parts about the way this thing works. This particular game plays out. All the puzzles make sense because you like, and it's very open about it. Is that their father was into stuff. He was into codes and into making codes and breaking things, and it was something that rubbed off on um, on the missing sister. She likes mysteries and she likes codes and she likes breaking them, and she learned with her father and she was close to her dad, um, and that's part of the game in it. So the fact that there are puzzles in it aren't just time killers, they're not just misdirections. It is This is very much like I say, it turns into a spy thriller, or the start of one, and it is very much about codes and just secret messages and interaction with the paper and around as you follow her trail of how she followed her, this original mystery that she stumbled upon. So it's very much, all the puzzles are very much embedded in the narrative, and the physical form that they take are it brings it into the real world. So like there's things where like you get a page from a book, and the book has meaning. There's a map, and there's newspaper clippings, and it all actually ties in together, and it does it very well.
And
So if I could ask a
go
quick
ahead.
question, one of the things that I really love about escape rooms, I guess, is like a feeling of progression, that things lead into one another and sort of flow really nicely. As someone who doesn't do a lot of at-home boxed experiences, how does this manage to capture that sense of progression or expansion or growth?
It very much does, like, in the same way that escape rooms, sometimes, like, when if you line the stars up, like you said, the shoe size, it corresponds to the stars, and you line, put the shoes in the right order, something happens. They managed to do that in the box. And it's all, there's it flows very well in such a way that it's a logical progression of where you should look next. And if you are savvy, like, like game explorer game, or like or escape room artist, you know certain things of how to look, right? You know how to look for certain things, and they'll be there if you look for them that way. Which is kind of cool, because I actually stumbled on some things completely in that same way. You kind of ransack the room, and I've stumbled on some things, but until you have the connection, like, it's obvious that there's something you're supposed to do with it, but until you actually have the connection of how it's supposed to work out, so it is possible to jump ahead, but without the context, you can't solve the puzzle, if that makes sense.
So there's no great risk of sequence breaking.
No, there's no great. I mean, you can break the sequence in this, but you're not. You can go ahead out of sequence, but if you don't have context, and that's the cool thing, is like, one things I really enjoyed about it is that the context is there, and so if you solve the puzzle without context, you didn't know what you were supposed to do with it. So
It's only when you solve everything it comes together like a true mystery.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, there are things that open up, and so, like, even the mystery itself, there are things that you discover as you go along. So, unless you put all the pieces together and figure certain things out, you're not going to get that. So, and the neat thing is that this particular game actually presents more questions as you find out more things. The idea behind them, and this is apparently is the first of a trilogy, what they're doing. And so they're doing this Kickstarter to get this one up and running. They're ready for production on this. It's going to be coming out. I think they're going to be able to deliver to Europe in time for Christmas, and then the greater internationally right at the beginning of the year. After this Kickstarter ends. But they're going to be doing more to a different Kickstarter to release the next 2 episodes in early 2022. But this is the start of a story. It plays as well as itself as a standalone, but it's part of a 3 excuse me, a 3 box arc, if you would, which tells a bigger story, and which is what they did with the original game. But they've added some new things. So there's an overarching puzzle that connects all 3 games, and some new things that you can find. So there are things even in this one that connect to the next games 2 and 3. So they made a bigger story than just what's in the box, and that's there's something to be said for that. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's something we haven't seen a lot in these kind of box games, is a continuing story. And I know that's not super common and immersive, but it happens where you kind of have these series of shows. So it's interesting that's kind of taking part in a box one now, and kind of that further merging of these kind of escape room in a boxes and immersive theater into kind of really mixing those ideas together. That's always cool to see.
It is a nice step towards serialization, and I think it's actually very smart if you have a continuous box, because just like comic books, you have a great step in book, and then you have the series as it goes on. So it leaves them the space to do more stories and do more things and spin-offs with this. So it's a really smart move.
Yeah, and I know there are some, like the Hunt to Killer series, that does that, like on a 6-month type scale. I'm actually in my own home. I'm actually sitting on the Detective Society. Actually, something that Ed, our correspondent, reviewed forever ago, and I finally just bit the bullet and did it all. But I think what's really cool is that there are some, whether I don't know whether the market has shifted to support this, or whether the materials are more available. I'm excited that there are smaller operations, like there are just like a creator or two who have the resources and time to build this model, to build out these stories and be supportive in this model and explore that kind of stuff too. And I think it's always kind of, because I was looking at the photos, and I think um, there is, like, you can just tell, like I'm looking at a photo of kind of like maybe generally everything that's in this box, and you could just tell that the newspaper that's in there, it's definitely just, even in the photo, it looks like a newspaper. Like you can feel it, right? Like and it has such a attention to detail to that. So I'm so excited that there are more of these smaller kind of operations where maybe it's, while there is a story at play, there is so much thought and attention being put into the actual crafting of the box and the crafting of the materials. Because I do think while Hunt to Killer and some of those other ones are really good at having all that together, it does feel, for lack of a better word, a little mass produced sometimes. Like it's definitely like we've made like 10,000 copies of this box and it's ready to go, where some of these smaller ones, like this experience you did, Anthony, are clearly like almost made on demand. Kind of like what Kevin, we did, the Welcome Home experience, where clearly when you place that order, they're like, it could take 2 weeks to a month, because we're actually going to package this in real time. It hasn't been sitting on the shelf. You are going to get this assembled just for you.
Yeah, and I think it's especially Welcome Home. I was actually gonna bring that because I think it is a great point. Like I've done one of the Hunt to Killers, and yeah, like the design is great. Like it's cool stuff, but it is something, like it feels a little special when it's like, as you're going through Welcome Home, to like realize it's like, oh, like someone put this together by hand, like designed all these pieces and picked these things out and put them all in the box in this order, um, and not like a machine or something.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, if you ever did any of the Mysterious Package Company stuff, and which I've done a few of those, it's they're about the same quality of care. It's like they took the time to crumple pages and to put to fold things so that it feels lived in, and it makes it very real world, and it brings you into the story. And for me, that kind of puts it very much in. There was a question. There's always the question of whether or not some of these games fall into our bailiwick. And one of the things for me for this one, it is like that same attention to detail that brings you into the world of the story. So you are in the plane, you are on the same plane in the same world as this character, and so you can, as you're reading through the letters, you can see this lady in her early 60s writing this letter, and that she's worried about her sister. She hasn't heard from her in a long time, and then it's still a thing. It's very still real. So, there's something to be said about that kind of attention to detail as opposed to the mass-produced stuff. It makes it more immersive, and that's what we're all about. So.
For sure. And then, so is the Kickstarter available yet, or it hasn't launched?
So the Kickstarter is launching at the end of September, late September. They haven't given an exact date yet. However, if you keep an eye out for it, sorry, my brain is trying to actually look at a note.
Well, like typically on Kickstarter,
it's
you
like
can go to
Kickstarter,
the page and you can set a reminder, so when it launches, you can get an email. And I'm sure they have the same setup.
in the exact same there. Yeah. So if you take a look and look out for the company that they're called right now is Diorama Games, and again, if you keep a lookout for the Vandermist Dossier, you'll be able to find it. And it's, like I said, it's launching at the end of September. So it looks like it's going to be really cool. It's about, I think they're doing about $40 US right now for Kickstarter members starting at, and then they have additional things that they're going to be doing as well. So I think it's a pretty good deal to keep an eye out for in the future.
Cool. And I imagine if they, when we get to the next ones, you'll talk about them more on the site. And we're going to stick in the world of escape rooms, and I'm going to jump in now with an actual a book review on Review Crew, which is a little bit different, but it's very much in the immersive world, so we're just going to go with it. I'm going to talk about Planning Your Escape by Ellie Hall. Ellie Hall is among other things, escape room designer, launched one in Oregon, I think in the mid 2010s. And so now she's written a book about escape rooms and essentially immersive theater. So the book is kind of in two halves. The first half details kind of how we got to escape rooms, starting in let me check the official timeline, in ancient history and moving all the way up in today. And it kind of walks through various states of play and festivals and boardwalk games, all the way up to kind of how arcades and video games up, and then through kind of ARGs and up to modern kind of immersive theater and escape rooms. So that's the first half. And that's the half I've read, and which I want to talk about today. The second half is more kind of tips on actually making your way through an escape room, covering kind of everything about how they play to how you can be better at them, and covering codes and ciphers and ways to look at locks and things like that. What I really appreciate about the first half, though, is the way she walks through the history of kind of all of these things to end up where we got through today, and kind of drawing a line between them. It's a really interesting way to kind of look at how we ended up at escape rooms and immersive theater, and the links between all these things, whether it's kind of video games or ARGs, and the connections between all these things. And I think it's things we think and talk about a lot, even on this show, is how they're all kind of connected. And this book does a great job at covering how those all come together for ultimately escape rooms.
Yeah, I'm flipping through my copy right now, and I think what's kind of interesting, in particular at the beginning, as I kind of have perused this book very lightly, is how, in so many ways, it's interesting that we come on the show and sometimes we get very focused in on the terms. What is this thing? What labels can we put it on? And what little box can we put it in? Is it a dark ride? Is it a sandbox experience? Is it on rails? So on and so forth. And I really like how in like the early chapters and kind of looking through this, it definitely is like the concept of what it's a very open in that sense, right? Like it's just simply about like in the 1800s, it's about just simply like expanding what play is and just getting out of like that rut, which I think is also a very interesting like parallel between that's run throughout the entire kind of like immersive and escape room industry. It's like it's just about evolution of play. It's about going further. It's about thinking of a new way to be active in your entertainment.
Yeah, that's definitely there. I think you kind of made another good point there too, is that she explains it in pretty common terms. Like, you don't need to be bought into immersive or escape rooms to really kind of understand it. I assume you probably are on some level if you're buying this book, but it's pretty general in terms of like, hey, you don't know, you've never been to Sleep No More, you've never been to Then She Fell, you've never been into something immersive, and it kind of walks you through that. You don't know what an ARG is. Here's kind of where those started. Here's how kind of video games started, and here's how they tie into escape rooms and immersive theater and the theory of kind of play in all these aspects. And it's very beginner friendly and like kind of introduction to this stuff without like getting super heady or like deep into these concepts that people may not have experienced on their own.
Well, and so in that sense, what is, as someone who works in this industry and is involved and covers it, have you read anything so far that you found, whether it's, obviously something maybe from way before our lifetime that you learned, or something about today that you're like, oh, wow, I never knew that or never thought about that? Have you come across anything like that?
Yeah, so I think in some of the ARG stuff, I think it's like you're familiar with some of them, but it's like she goes into kind of the Beast, she goes into I Love Bees and kind of different parts of that. And I think you've heard about it, and you kind of are familiar with them, but I think it's that kind of the line she draws into how those work together and how they kind of, where those kind of ideas emerge from. It's like, oh, okay, we've taken these ideas and kind of taken this from the ARG into the immersive space or into the escape room space, and kind of even how ARGs and immersive and escape rooms have all kind of blended together. I think that's the more modern stuff that people are more aware of. But there's some early stuff. I can't remember the name of the festivals at this point because I think they're kind of European. But there's some interesting stuff in the terms of these festivals that she talks about, and how those kind of laid the groundwork for play that made its way across the world ultimately. And yeah, it's just like there's a lot of interesting stuff in there, and it's pretty, again, beginner friendly if you're not familiar with these things. It's just like a brief overview of this history instead of being like you need to have an in-depth understanding of kind of ancient history or 1800s and kind of parts of, not like Norway or Sweden or something.
So I guess building off of that, and just to get a little bit more granular, you say it talks a lot about this historical stuff. Was there anything in the book from another era or another place in time, or even just say 20 years ago, that you just had the reaction of, oh God, if only I had a time machine, that is the thing I would go to?
Yeah, so it's actually, I think you can probably find it on YouTube. It was a specific game show in Britain in the 80s, I think. Let me find the name of
Crystal
it.
Maze? Are you going to
Yes.
talk about the Crystal Maze? Because
Exactly.
I am crazy about that show. There is so much of it on YouTube. It is amazing.
Yeah, so I guess, and to Patrick's point, that's like one of the things I like read about that I didn't know about. And it's like, oh, this thing sounds cool, and it's certainly like a progenitor of escape rooms and like immersive theater and the theming of it. Can you talk a little bit about it? Because it sounds cool, cool, and I haven't watched it yet.
It is a baddie show. For many seasons, it was hosted by Richard O'Brien, who many of you will know as Riff Raff from Rocky Horror Picture Show. And basically, they get 5 usually not particularly bright people or so, and they have to go through a series of really wildly themed immersive environments and try to earn crystals. And each crystal they get gives them more time in one of those chambers with a big fan that blows around a ton of confetti, and if they catch enough of it, they get a vacation. And no one ever wins this show, but that's not the point. The point is that they're really traveling and doing all sorts of really odd little locked room challenges one at a time in this wild space. And again, I recommend, there's a lot of back episodes floating around on YouTube, or at the very least clips. If you haven't seen it and you're an immersive theater fan jonesing for big environments during COVID restrictions, this is one of those shows that could get me through that.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go dig it up on YouTube because I was reading it. I was like, oh, this sounds like so much fun.
It is a blast.
Well, and then even in just literally flipping through that section, it's page 63 through 65 for those following at home in their books. I find it interesting that like one of the things she takes note of is how O'Brien like was such a integral part of this, and like how that started so accidentally that it was just about like he would talk to the audience where in many ways, it was just maybe about the people, like just classic television. Here we are, we're being recorded, we're doing our little play, and we're going to go home. But how he really seemed to just, what started off as just wanting to make the cameraman laugh, O'Brien like invites the audience and makes the audience, like, makes everybody a part of this experience, right? It's not necessarily, it's still passive on the viewer's part, but they definitely seem more invested because they are being acknowledged, something that I think immersive theater does a lot, and that's a big part of what kind of separates what we do from a lot of other forms.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely seems like it really like bring people into the immersive element of the game show, even more than like a normal host in the way he kind of like did stuff like that. We probably shouldn't spend all our time talking about this this 80s game show from England though.
If you're very interested, I don't know if it's still running, but the last time I was in Britain, they were running a live action version of it. So maybe we'll get lucky and get a no pro field trip one day and get to have our own little Crystal Maze
Yeah,
adventure.
for sure.
But there's, they even talk about like, just really quickly, like, once again, I'm now on a page 93 where the Blair Witch Project comes up, and right, like that concept, and I think this is maybe something that's been forgotten to the sands of time, is how like we were told those were real people, and they marketed it as such, and like to the point where when like the movie came out, like wasn't the studio trying to like prevent them from being seen in public
No,
or
no,
something?
the
Oh
studio
no.
doubled up. The studio doubled down on it. This is one that Noah and I talk about all the time. We always go back to the Blair Witch Project because it's one of the first great transmedia projects out there. Um, they started it and they doubled down because they released the sci-fi channel. They released a special on the sci-fi channel that literally expands the whole universe of the Blair Witch and tells more of the story. So it's that same thing of if you acknowledge the audience and bring them into it, and you take the time to make the care, and you put all of it in there, creates a bigger story and bigger world. And there's stuff in that movie that was scarier if you read the website, if you watch the special, and then you go and see the movie, and then there's like moments in it you went, holy crap, that's someone. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just bring it up because once again, it's just like I think in this first half of this book, even just flipping through it now, it's like so, really just kind of opening up the sense of what, is immersive theater and acknowledging it. And it's like where we've come and really some really kind of important things. So I meant in many ways, like, I guess if you're a beginner and you need to build your team to do an escape room, like I'm sure the second half of this book is going to be very helpful. I can't do word scrambles if my life depended on it, so I can't wait to get into that. But like the first half, just like what a great primer this seems like to just like learn more about everything immersive theater and escape rooms and VR and ARGs are doing.
Yeah, and I think like I said, Aaron, we've both been into it, and you spent a few minutes looking through it. I kind of read the first half, and it's a good refresher on kind of how all these things are connected, whether it's movies and the websites and the kind of transmedia projects that birth those, and how those are all connected to kind of everything else that we're so interested in. And it's been a great time, and I'd really recommend it kind of for all levels, even if you're not a big escape room fan. I think the first half of the book is probably worth it, and then maybe the second half will get you more into escape rooms if that's not your jam, as you can figure out how to do the puzzles and how to work through those. And I'm excited to dig into that at some point, but the first half is still highly recommended. And then one of the things that actually Ellie Hall talks about too is Burning Man and how that kind of interacted and kind of birthed some things in the immersive movements that led to ARGs and different things. And then, so now I'm going to turn it over to Patrick to talk about how Burning Man made its way into VR.
Yeah, because I was actually on that's page 75 for those following at home. Yeah, so I am not going to be talking about Burning Man, the actual experience that is happening in the desert. I am talking about BRCvr, which is, the official virtual Burning Man experience. To just as a brief recap, in case we have some new listeners or maybe people who haven't caught some of the previous podcasts, as with a lot of things with the pandemic, shifts were had to be made and things like that. And what Burning Man did last year was, in regards to having issues with COVID, is that they pivoted to an online space where people could go to hub worlds. And basically, for right now, it's currently in Altspace VR, and you basically, from either a VR headset or from a desktop computer, you're able to go wander the digital dunes of Black Rock Desert in Nevada and have the Burning Man experience. And without all of those things, like
The skin corroding acid dust.
making sure that you're completely hydrated all the time, though. If you're on a headset and you've got your hot brick VR on your face, definitely keep drinking water too, because that can be a pain. But yeah, so I've been wandering the digital dunes the last couple days and really kind of getting into the most of this experience. And I've got to say, I'm really having the time of my life. I think it's been a really cool thing. There are so many cool places to explore. And let me take a step back too and kind of setting it up. So basically, you can do it one of two ways. You can basically enter the main hub world in Altspace VR, which is just basically like, hey, here you are. Here's some instructions on how to do things and move about. And then here are some portals you can take to other worlds, or you could specifically, if you have the codes and the information and the links, go to specific spaces and explore with, either by yourself or with a group of people, different really cool worlds that have been specifically built for this environment, that have messages that are either related to the grander themes of Burning Man, whether it's maybe showcasing some art that would not be able to go to Burning Man otherwise, but is still tangentially related.
So I got a couple of questions about this. I guess the first one is about that art. I know Burning Man, a lot of people kind of go and they make art there. Are any of the people that kind of like attended, have they made anything for this, or where the artists or art come from that's present in the VR experience?
Well, yeah. So I will not lie. I'm not quite sure on whether it's officially like all part of it, like if there's something that was actually built out there in BlackRock, if it was actually then digitally created. But there are definitely a lot of really cool experiences and works of art there. In nearly every space and every hub world I've visited, I've definitely had to like look up at something, right? And I've definitely had to stop and like walk around and like admire 360 degrees worth of detail of a structure that has been digitally created, that has a sense of scale to it, for sure. Like, definitely there is the Burning Man, which you can see and does tower over you. But then there are definitely things that feel constructed. And there's definitely a distinction between what is just kind of digitally been created. Like, there are a lot of like tents and like RV vans there, but they're very kind of low res, and they have a very copy and paste feel to them. But then that works so well, because then the stuff that really seems like someone actually like melted metal and twisted it, or like took a hammer and took two pieces of wood and put them together, there is a real sense of texture and thought and a desire that someone actually built this, even though it's in VR. Like, it really does capture some of the beautiful work of like someone taking the time and being like, okay, I'm not there. This is a digital space, but how can I make it seem like, and how can I convey and almost have it be a texture of a physical really thing, of a physical real thing.
Hmm. And then kind of along that line, like I think one of the things about Burning Man, like I've never been, but I know a few people have gone, is kind of that like just being like radically present and kind of in the moment and experiencing like the actual thing and the hardships that are like part of the desert. Does that kind of make its way in the VR experience, or does it kind of come at it from a different angle in terms of how to like approach like Burning Man?
There's it's a little bit of both. I would say that, they definitely do acknowledge, like, in theory, you are in the desert. So there are definitely lots of like signs about staying hydrated. A lot of the worlds sometimes have bars. Where you can, pick up a digital drink in your hands and walk around with it, right? So there's definitely trying to convey some of the physical aspects, and maybe even dangers, dare I say, of wandering around in that desert if you're not careful. But you definitely do feel safe in that sense, and it's not like any kind of concern there in that. There was the second part to your question, and I realized I just blanked on it. What was it?
I don't even know because I just blanked on it too.
But like,
What?
go ahead.
What's the scope of this? Because, I'm imagining this as like the most expansive virtual world I've ever dreamed of. I'm imagining this as, miles and miles of virtual desert. How long would you say an average tour of even the highlights would take?
The least I've been in it for about 3 to 4 hours now, and easily think I've only maybe seen a fourth of what there is to offer, and to experience and take a part of. I think what's really clever, and I think that's a great question, Blake, because there's been lots of times where I've just been walking and I hit the digital wall. Because what I think is really smart is that they have captured that there are tents that go, it does seem to spiral and go on and on and on for miles, right? I really feel like I could just walk through different rows of tents and get lost and be a part of it, because in Altspace VR there's a function where you can soar, you can kind of fly around to move around a little faster and maybe get a different visual perspective on it. So when you like fly straight up in the main hub world, um it looks like it's going for miles and miles and miles. I haven't explored the hub world to its extreme. Like, I haven't tried to go all the way there, but then there are smaller places that kind of like capture part of it. Like, it's like you can see the entirety of Burning Man off in the distance, or it's like maybe just you're standing in part of it, you can see the rest of it stretch for miles. And I've definitely just been walking around and I'm like, wait, why can't I move? And I'm like, oh, I've reached the end of this alt space VR world. So I think they did a really great job of working within the constrictions, right? Because it would be impossible. Some of these worlds would crash and fall apart, and no one would be able to get into them if they really did capture the size and the scope. So I think they really did a good job of ensuring that, like, the backgrounds, like the walls and the floor and the ceiling of these digital cubes, basically, right? Because that's what you're walking around in a way, feel like they stretch on for infinity and they are a part of something bigger. Maybe you can only go so far, but there is a larger world out there, and maybe you can't get to the next point from this world, but go back to the main hub world, hop into a different portal, and then you're over in the other part you couldn't get to. And now you're seeing the other side of Burning Man.
And then kind of on the scope side, are there other people in there with you, or is it just kind of you wandering alone? Because I know that like that's a big
Well,
part of
yes,
Burning Man.
yeah, I'm alone. I've asked the staff constantly. Why didn't you guys? Here's three people. Why didn't you guys respond to any of
I
my
don't have a
unspoken?
headset, man.
I just said you could just do this from your
Oh,
desktop, and I know you're recording from your desktop. No, but like, yeah, so there's definitely lots of people talking when you enter the main hub world. It's actually a little disoriented because they plop you, like, I think everyone spawns in the same exact space, so like you are suddenly like hearing lots of people talking as they kind of hop in, and then there's definitely first timers, so there's people trying to figure out how to move, and you overhear conversations and things like that. But I was actually I one of the worlds I visited was the Icarus spaceport, where in their thing you can actually you go to their specific hub world, and then there's a little portal you get into where you can be on the Icarus, which is basically kind of like this. It's a vehicle. It's like an open top vehicle, right? And it's just like going around in circles. And when I was there, it was just me, and there was two other people, and I believe they were speaking French or German, some European language, and it was still really cool though. Like, cause I was just standing there, they're just talking. They're having a perfectly fine time on this barge as it slowly moves around in this little hub world. And I'm just staring out, looking at all of the things in the distance of Burning Man and stuff like that. So it's definitely a very active place for both for those who are able to go with other people, and frankly there is a lot of stuff that is just really cool to see. One of my favorite places I've discovered so far is Playa Stonehenge, and it's Stonehenge, but there's like, what I really like what they've done is there's music playing, there's like rain, there's like a little fire in the middle of Stonehenge, and it's definitely a living, breathing space. So even if you go there by yourself, there is still a lot to be had here, and there's a lot of really cool stuff to just simply be present for and soak in and admire the digital beauty that someone has crafted for you.
Nice. That sounds like a really cool experience, and like that translating something like Burning Man into VR seems obviously very difficult, and seems like they've nailed it on some level to kind of encompass all those aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think, it for both, I think, for a second year edition and where we are digitally in the world, I think they've really done a really great job, and it's really a gathering experience in that sense. And if you can't make it to maybe Burning Man in the future, or if there's ever issues again, you can definitely still have a Burning Man like experience that is equally worthy with BRCvr.
All right, now we're gonna kick it over to Blake, and I don't have a cool segue for you, Blake, so I'm just gonna toss it to you.
Oh, gee, Mom, everyone else got a cool segue. No,
The segue
don't worry about it.
is a segue.
So, hi. I'm going to be talking today actually about an app called I'm So Hot. And this is something that it kind of had.
Blake, back up. I got one now.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, like Burning Man is obviously a very hot thing. So now we're gonna kick it over to Blake, who's covering.
Oh, I'm So Hot. Oh, perfect. So, right on. Spot on. So
Really
this
nailed it.
is a new piece produced by The Tank in co-production with New Light Theater Project and Procket Universe that is a narrative app based off a Pierre de Marveilleux comedy satire, La Dispute. I think it's from either the 17 or the 1800s. That's slipped my mind, I'm afraid. But the innovation of this old-timey Battle of the Sexes play is that it's all being told through a Tinder-esque dating app. And so what this really does to kind of ground this piece is that it gives you dating profiles for all of the characters. It has all of the action taking place via DMs and FaceTime chats. And the thing that I love about it is that you also get to make a profile and under your pseudonyms gossip with the other participants with, oh honey, oh no's in the comment section, or kind of throw yourself into sort of the shallow fun of the whole thing with little pop quizzes, the kind you might find on OkCupid, you know, asking you, if you were a French food, what would you be and why? And so through kind of this combination of light audience social interaction and really kind of fun, goofy prompts to get you involved, it makes this fairly unknown, fairly, you know, hoity-toity, old-timey French play super accessible. And that's definitely something to be celebrated. So to give kind of a basic plot summary, just as a jumping off point, a prince and his lover are having a dispute. Who cheats first, men or women? And so they devise an experiment. In the original, it's them putting 4 orphans in an Edenic paradise-like garden where they pair them off into couples and then try to stir up love triangles to encourage someone to cheat. But on this one, it becomes almost a reality TV show dating game put through the lens of this dating app, where you, as sort of you're both cast as a participant, but a favored participant who's a friend of the prince, who can watch the DMs from his side of things. And, you know, as you're expecting from kind of a French sex comedy, things get very ribald very fast. All the characters are a little bit zany. In the original, you know, of course, they're all talking with these, you know, very sort of bon mot flirtations, but it's all put through, as the title, "Oh, I'm so hot," suggests, into this very sort of vapid Valley Girls and Himbos lens that really grounds it in sort of a fun, modern Love Island kind of vibe.
Well, and I have a question, Blake, because I was a little unclear about this, you know, just in general about the experience. So is there any live component to this, or is this all like, you know, you put in the prompt and you get like a recording of a performer or something?
So I would say it's 90% pre-recorded. Some of it is done via dating sim-esque text chains with some of the characters. Some of it is done via pre-recorded video segments. And some of it is done via app interface, you know, witnessing other people's DMs as a third-party observer. But there is this slight live component, other than your sort of interaction with the app, that I really like, in that you are able to post comments on everything. And so that does kind of turn into this fun popcorn, excuse me, popcorn throwing experience.
And
the audiences do get pretty chatty.
so that's what I was gonna ask. So the full audience is in there together at like any given time, so like you can chat with the other people that are playing along or watching along with you.
Pretty much so. It's like an old-fashioned message board or YouTube comment section, more or less. But it does update in... Excuse me, sorry, got a bit of dust in my throat. It does update pretty much in real time as you're playing through it. So if you have a friend who wants to play along with you, you can have a pretty good time. My one slight caveat, and I just do want to warn audiences, is that for all the fun of the acting and the writing, have the Wikipedia page up for La Dispute, because some of the fun little in-jokes and references are going to be lost on you without a plot synopsis next to you, unless you're one of the, 10 French literature majors who love this play. And also, the app can be the slightest bit glitchy. While I really enjoyed it, it was occasionally a battle to try to get it to work.
Well, I think it's an interesting question in regards to the summary. Like, are you saying that, like, you can't follow what's going on without a plot summary, or is it just simply you get more out of it by having a plot summary?
More the latter. The plot is
Okay.
pretty clear. It works pretty well. The main sort of The example that comes to mind is a sequence which comes across as a little bit bizarre without familiarity with the original work, in which the character of, I'm going to be mispronouncing this horribly, forgive me, Eggle, who is this vain, narcissistic, shallow, clear dating show villainess, starts DMing with a river that she sees her own reflection in. And it's a lot of, you so hot. Oh no, girl, you so hot. And it kind of comes out of nowhere, but there is an extended point in the original in which she first catches sight of her reflection in a river and decides it's the most beautiful thing she's ever seen. And it's a very fun way to play off of that scene. But that's the kind of thing that might be lost on someone who doesn't have more of a familiarity with the original work. It's still going to be a fun scene. It's just going to be a little bit of a non sequitur.
And does this run like multiple times? Like, can you jump in and like play again, and can you like affect the outcome or get like different ways of it ending?
There's no real multiple endings. And to be fair, the ending is my other, slight complaint. I don't want to rag on this show because I had a lot of fun with it, but the ending can be a little anticlimactic.
But is that the fault of the source material, or is
it's more the fault of the source material, and also I think maybe just like a slight tragedy of adaptation. While the source material is a little bit biting in terms of its satire, a little bit mean-spirited, to the point where I think part of the reason it doesn't get produced is that it's a little bit problematic in its depiction of, let's just say, male-female interactions. The tone of this is so light and fluffy, very, very reality TV, that trying to keep some of that bite from the original might have been difficult. And so I think without that, the ending falls a little bit flat. Which, I mean, perhaps they could have considered that in deciding what to adapt. But I think it's better to live in a world with I'm So Hot than a world without I'm So Hot. So I'm totally willing to overlook that.
Yeah, I think that's something we've talked about periodically. And here's like, does the show or kind of piece of immersive entertainment know what it wants to be? And this seems like it very much does. So it's like it's a piece of light, fun kind of, like you compared to Temptation Island, Love Island, and F-Boy Island, like just kind of these like silly kind of reality TV shows. They're easy to like get sucked into, and that's something I don't think we see a lot in immersive stuff. So it's a good element to have in there.
Comedy in immersive is hard, especially like, I feel like when we do get comedy, it's usually either a little bit on the bizarro side, which is great for me, but I mean is a little bit inaccessible to some people, or it tends to be very slapstick. This very fun blend of, old-time French satire with modern spoof is this very nice sweet spot that I would love to see, maybe not particularly with French satire, but more of this sort of highbrow meets pop vibe I would be very into.
Well, and if comedy is hard in immersive theater, it's got to be deadly in an app in that sense to navigate. But I wonder also then, this brings up another question. Blake, would you have maybe equally enjoyed, and this is super hypothetical, but like, would you love to see this show again, but maybe not as an adaptation, but as original content through an app? Like, I'm trying to decide if like the using of this old French, romp play might have actually held back the experience, where if they had pushed forward with their own content, and I'm not, like, adaptations are fine and making your own content is very hard, of course, but I'd be curious if they would be better, if hypothetically it could be better served if it was its own narrative and support in relationship with this app.
You are right. That is a very hypothetical question. So I'm going to approach it a little bit sideways, I think. So I forget the name of the program on Steam, but there was a program that came out, within the past 5 or 6 years that basically is just an engine that lets you write your own visual novels. And it's maybe not the smoothest engine, it's maybe a little bit clunky, and a lot of the content that you might be introduced to it with might not be ideal, but I think that trying to democratize and get more visual novels in the world is a great thing. With that in mind, I kind of look at this in the same way. I think that there is some really interesting thought here structurally that was intense enough that I can see why they would want to start worrying a little bit less about, developing their source material on. When you have sort of the framework of, an adaptation, I feel like you can afford a little bit more of structural experimentation. Sleep No More popularized everything, most everything that Punch Drunk has done has popularized a lot of these large-scale, immersive sandbox promenade shows, and they love adaptation, and I can see why, because when an audience is confronted with, and when a creative team is confronted with this very new structural challenge, it's nice to have something to fall back on. With that being said, now that we've got sort of this baseline, admittedly clunky as it is, I would love to see more development into this infrastructure and more work with it now moving into original work. If people are getting familiarity with this structure of immersive theater, with people getting used to interacting with an app as both a social let's face it, maybe an 8th social, 7/8 narrative device.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of growth and potential here. And I think that, me as just kind of a nerd for the form, that definitely elevated it a lot for me. But, again, the price is right. It's $10 for an experience that's going to take you, at least 90 minutes, maybe a bit more. And it's a lot of fun. It just brought a smile to my face. And it's rare to see something that is both, fun and charming, but also pushes things forward a little bit. And I think this walks a nice line there, even if it occasionally has ambitions that outstrip its tech.
For sure. I think that's a great close to that subject, and probably the end of the pond here. If anyone has any last minute pitches for pitch of the week, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next week.